You picked up your phone this week and it still worked, so you think nothing has changed. It has. Quietly, without a proper warning, the phone line sitting in your hallway is being switched off for good. Not repaired, not upgraded, switched off. And here is what nobody put in plain English for you. If you are over 65, live alone, or rely on a personal alarm around your neck, this single change could leave you cut off in the exact moment you need help most. I found that out the hard way, standing in my mother's hallway last October, staring at the little box on her wall with a red light blinking and no dial tone at all. So stay with me, because before the end, I am going to hand you one free action, backed by an Ofcom rule that came into force in March 2024. That puts you at the front of the queue for protection and costs you absolutely nothing. And if you are thinking this cannot touch you because you barely use your phone, or because you only have a mobile, I need you to stay especially close. You are the exact person they are counting on to find out too late. Let me take you back to that hallway, because that is where all of this started for me. My mother is 79. She has a pendant alarm, the kind you press if you fall, the kind the whole family paid into so we could sleep at night. Last autumn her phone went dead. No warning letter that made any sense. No engineer knocking, just silence on the line. And when I picked up that pendant and pressed the button, the way she would if she were lying on the kitchen floor, nothing happened. No call went out. No voice came back. Her lifeline had quietly stopped being a lifeline, and not one person had told her why. At first I honestly thought it was a fault, a loose wire, a bill she had forgotten to pay. I rang the provider, ready to apologize for her, and a young lad on the other end said the words that made my stomach drop. He said, "Oh, her line has been migrated to digital." Migrated. As if her telephone had packed a suitcase and moved house without telling anyone who loved her. That word sent me down a rabbit hole I have not climbed out of since. Because what I learned is that this is not a glitch. It is a nationwide plan, it has a name, and it has a deadline. And the people it hits hardest are the people least likely to be warned in time. The name is the public switched telephone network switch-off. That is the mouthful the industry uses. In plain English, the entire old copper telephone network, the one that has carried our voices since before most of us were born, is being retired. Every analog landline in the country is being moved onto the internet, whether you use the internet or not. OpenReach, the company that owns the physical wires, has been shutting down the old system exchange by exchange, and the whole thing is meant to be finished by the end of January 2027. Now that date got pushed back, and there is a reason it got pushed back, and that reason should worry you more, not less. It got pushed back because people like my mother started getting hurt. But I will come to that. Here is what actually changes for you, in real terms, in your own home. Your old landline never needed electricity. That is the quiet genius of it that we all forgot. When the power went out in a storm, your phone still worked, because it drew a tiny bit of power down the phone line itself from the exchange. You could still ring for an ambulance in a blackout. Your neighbor could still ring you. The new digital phone does not do that. The new system runs through a little box, a router, that plugs into the mains electricity in your house. And the moment the power goes off, that box goes dead, and so does your phone. No dial tone. No 999. Nothing. In a power cut on a dark winter night, the exact situation where an older person is most likely to fall or take ill, your phone becomes a paperweight. That is the change. That is the thing they slipped past millions of households while we were all worrying about the price of the weekly shop. And if you are sitting there thinking, well, I have a mobile, I will just use that. Hold on, because that safety net has a hole in it too, and I am going to show you exactly where. But first, let me stay on this landline for one more minute, because there is a piece of this that made me genuinely angry when I understood it. When my mother's line was switched, she was never asked. There was no conversation about whether she was vulnerable. There was no check on whether she had a pendant alarm hanging round her neck. The migration just happened, on a schedule, because her postcode came up on somebody's list. And her personal alarm, the one that talks to the monitoring center down the telephone line, simply stopped talking. It looked like it was working. The light was on, but it had gone silent, and we only found out because the line itself died at the same time. If the line had stayed up and only the alarm signal had failed, we might not have found out until the day she really needed it. There are, by the industry's own estimates, roughly 1.8 million people in this country relying on these devices, and a good number of them were migrated onto digital lines before anyone had checked their alarm would still work on the new system. It got so bad that in 2023 the big providers had to sign a public agreement, a checklist of promises, after real people were left without working alarms. That is not me being dramatic. That is the reason the whole timetable got delayed. They were moving faster than they were protecting people, and the people falling through the gap were pensioners. So the piece that clicks into place here is simple, and it is this. If you or someone you love has a personal alarm, a pendant, a fall detector, a monitored key safe, anything that dials out on its own, you cannot assume it still works after a line change. You have to test it, and I am going to tell you exactly how and who to ring before we finish. But here is the bigger question that opened up for me, the one that turned this from a landline problem into something much wider. Because I said to myself, fine, I will just make sure Mum keeps her mobile phone charged and by the bed. Problem solved. And that is when I discovered the second switch off. The one almost nobody is talking about. The one hitting mobile phones right now. There are actually two switch-offs happening at the same time, and that is the trap. While the landline network is being retired, the mobile networks are quietly killing off their old signal too. It is called the 3G switch-off. 3G is the older mobile signal that a huge number of basic phones and older handsets still rely on, and this is not years away. This is already happening. Vodafone began switching off its 3G network in 2024. EE started retiring its 3G. 3 has been closing its older network down, one by one, across 2024 and into 2025. The old mobile signal is going dark. And when it goes dark, an older handset that only knows how to speak 3G stops being able to make calls. Even, in some cases, stops being able to reach the emergency services. Now think about who owns those phones. Think about the simple, no-nonsense mobile with the big buttons that families buy for their elderly parents precisely because it is not complicated. Think about the emergency phone that lives in the glove box of the car for breakdowns. Think about the basic handset a widow keeps in her handbag, topped up with £10 every few months, that she has had for a decade because it does everything she needs. A lot of those phones speak only 3G, and a lot of them are about to fall silent. So the mobile I was relying on to save my mother in a power cut might, depending on the handset, be the next thing to stop working. Two lifelines, the landline and the mobile, both being quietly pulled away at the same moment from the same people, and no single letter arriving to explain that both things are happening together. That is what I mean when I say this is bigger than one rule. This is a whole layer of protection being peeled back from an entire generation, and the peeling is being done politely, on a schedule, in language designed to sound like progress. So let me be practical, because I promised you I would be. What do you actually do about the mobile side of it? You find out whether your handset supports 4G calling. The simplest way is to ring your mobile network. Tell them the exact make and model of the phone and ask them one direct question. Ask them, when you switch off 3G, will this phone still be able to make calls and reach emergency services? If they say no, they must help you sort a replacement. And many networks have been offering free or heavily discounted basic 4G handsets to older and vulnerable customers precisely because they know the risk. But you have to ask, nobody is going to knock on your door with a new phone. And here is where I need to stop and speak to one particular person watching this, because I can almost hear you. You are thinking, none of this is me. You are thinking, I do not have a pendant alarm. I am fit as a fiddle. I have a smartphone my grandson set up, and I have never had a power cut in my life. So you are getting ready to click away. Please do not. Sit with me for 2 more minutes, because this next part is aimed straight at you, and it is the part I most wish someone had said to me before that night in the hallway. Here is why it still reaches you. This is not only about the phone in your hand. When the copper network is switched off, it is not just voice calls that ride on those old lines. Think about everything in a modern home that quietly phones home down a wire. Some house alarms, some care lines, some medical monitors, some of the card machines in your local shops, some of the lift emergency phones in sheltered blocks of flats, even some door entry systems. All of these were built for the old network, and all of them are affected by the change. And a fair few of them are things you rely on without ever thinking about them. That is the part that keeps me up, and it is exactly why I wrote down everything I was learning as I went. If you want to go deeper than any single video can take you, I have put the full picture into a short digital book. It is called Pension Alert, and there are 2 companion guides, Beyond the Basics and Pension Proof, that cover the rights, the registers, and the exact questions to ask your provider in plain, unhurried language you can read at your own pace. You will find details in the description below. If you are the person in the family who handles these things for someone else, these guides were written with you specifically in mind. But back to the practical side of all this, because the mobile safety net has a hole in it too, and I am going to show you exactly where. And the deeper reason it reaches you is this: the change does not knock. There is no big red envelope. There is no phone call where a human being sits you down and explains what you are losing. My mother is sharp. She reads her post. She is nobody's fool. And it still happened to her without a single clear warning she could understand. If it can happen to her, it can happen to you. And the only defense is knowing about it before the switch is flipped, not after. So here is the one action I want you to take, and you can do it today, without paying a penny and without needing a single expert. Pick up the phone, ring your telephone and broadband provider, and say 4 words. Am I being migrated? Ask them when your line is scheduled to move to digital. Ask them to put a note on your account that you have medical or safety equipment that runs on the line if you do. That one call moves you from the group who find out in the dark to the group who find out in time. And that shift from in the dark to in time is the whole reason I make these. Now stay with me, because everything I have told you so far is the problem. What comes next is the protection, and it is the part they really do not advertise. Because as I dug deeper, one question kept nagging at me. If this change is so risky for older and vulnerable people, why is it being allowed to happen so quietly? Who benefits from millions of pensioners not understanding what is landing on them? And the answer is not a cartoon villain. The answer is simpler and, honestly, more infuriating. The old copper network is expensive to keep running. It is aging, it needs constant repair, and every year it costs the industry a fortune to patch up. The digital system is cheaper to run, so there is a powerful commercial reason to get everybody moved across as fast as possible and shut the old network down. Speed saves money. And the more customers who quietly accept the migration without asking awkward questions about their alarm or their power cut backup, the smoother and cheaper the whole thing goes. The confusion is not an accident you are the victim of. The confusion is friction that has been smoothed away, so the machine can run faster. Every pensioner who does not ask what happens in a power cut is one less complicated case to handle. That is the trail I followed, and that is where it led. But here is the twist, the thing that turns this from bad news into your advantage. Because so many people got hurt in the rush, the regulator stepped in, and it laid down rules that give you rights most people have no idea they have. And these rights are your protection. This is the finale I promised you, and I want you to get a pen, because this is the part that actually changes what happens to you. In March 2024, Ofcom, the communications regulator, strengthened its guidance to protect vulnerable customers through this switchover. And underneath that sits a firm expectation that every phone provider must offer a solution so that you can still contact the emergency services in a power cut. In plain English, if your new digital phone would die in a blackout, your provider has to give you a way around that. And the standard answer is a battery backup unit. This is the bit almost nobody knows. If you are vulnerable, if you are elderly, if you have a health condition, if you rely on your phone for a personal alarm, or if you simply have no working mobile signal where you live, your provider is expected to give you a battery backup unit, free of charge, that keeps your phone working for at least 1 hour during a power cut, not sold to you, given to you. Some providers offer units that last considerably longer, but the free backup for vulnerable customers is the thing you have to ask for, because they are not going to volunteer it. And there is a second layer of protection that is even more powerful, and it is the single best thing you can do today. So write this down. It is called the Priority Services Register. The Priority Services Register is a free service. Every energy supplier and every phone and broadband provider keeps one. It is a list of customers who need extra care, and getting on it changes how you are treated across the board. When you are on that register, your provider knows before they touch your line that you are vulnerable. They know not to migrate you without a proper conversation. They know to check your personal alarm will work on the new system before they flip the switch. They put you at the front of the queue for that free battery backup. And when the power goes out, your energy company knows you are on the list and prioritizes getting you reconnected and checking you are safe. It costs nothing. It takes one phone call or a few minutes on their website if you are comfortable with that. You can join it if you are over a certain age, if you have a disability or long-term illness, if you rely on medical equipment, if you have poor eyesight or hearing, or even temporarily if you have just come out of hospital. And here is the part that made me put the kettle on and sit down. Almost none of the people who qualify are actually signed up. The protection has been sitting there free this whole time, and the people who need it most have never been told it exists. So let me hand you the exact steps, plainly, the way I wish someone had handed them to me. First, ring your phone and broadband provider and ask to be added to the Priority Services Register. Then ring your electricity supplier and ask to be added to theirs too, because they run a separate one. 2 calls, both free. Second, while you have your phone provider on the line, ask them directly, when my line moves to digital, what happens in a power cut, and will you provide me a battery backup unit free of charge? If you are vulnerable, the answer should be yes. Make them note it on your account. Third, if you or someone in the house has a personal alarm or any medical monitor, tell your provider that too, and tell your alarm company. Ask the alarm company one question. Ask, is my device compatible with a digital phone line, and have you tested it? If they cannot say yes clearly, you push until they check, because that pendant is worthless if it cannot make its call. Fourth, and this is for anyone relying on an older mobile as their backup, ring your mobile network, give them the make and model, and ask whether that phone will still make calls after 3G is switched off. If not, ask what free or low-cost 4G replacement they offer vulnerable customers. 4 calls, maybe an afternoon of your time, and at the end of it, you have moved yourself and the people you love from the group. This change quietly catches out to the group that is protected by name on a register, with a backup in the cupboard and an alarm you have actually tested. That is the difference between finding out in the dark and finding out in time. I want to go back to my mother's hallway one last time, because there is an ending to that story. Once I understood all of this, I made those calls for her. I got her onto the Priority Services Register with both her phone provider and her electricity supplier. I got the battery backup unit sent out. I made the alarm company confirm, in writing, that her pendant works on the new digital line, and we tested it together, the 2 of us standing in the kitchen, her pressing the button, and both of us waiting until we heard the kind voice from the monitoring center come through and ask if she was all right. She said, I'm fine, love. We're just testing. And I have never been so relieved to hear a stranger's voice in my life. That is what I want for you. Not the fear, the phone call that fixes it. Because here is the truth I have landed on after all these months of reading the small print. Something was being quietly taken from you. Not your money this time. Something more basic than that. Your ability to call for help on the worst night of your life. And nobody was going to knock on your door and warn you it was going. You just reclaimed it in the last few minutes by understanding what almost nobody around you understands. You are the kind of person who does not sit quietly and let this happen. You are the kind who reads the letter, asks the awkward question, and makes the call not just for yourself but for the neighbor 2 doors down who has nobody to do it for her. So do this for them as well. Ring the person you know who lives alone, who has the pendant, who has the old handbag phone, and walk them through those 4 calls. That is how a whole street gets protected instead of one house. Now I want to hear from you, and I want to know one specific thing. Has your landline already been switched to digital, and if it has, did anybody actually warn you first, or did you find out the way I did, with a dead line and a blinking light? Tell me in the comments, because I read every one, and your story might be the exact warning that saves the next person scrolling past. I know this audience does not like to comment. I know you would rather sit quiet. But this once, please, leave one line, even just the name of your provider and whether they warned you, because it genuinely helps the person coming after you. And if you want to be in the group that finds these things out in time, before the letter that never properly arrives, before the switch is flipped, then stay with me for the next one. Because I have started pulling a thread on what happens to the emergency alarm systems in sheltered and warden-controlled housing when this switchover hits, and what I am finding there is worse than anything in the hallway. Do not find out too late. Find out with me first, while there is still time to do something about it. Test the pendant, make the calls, get on that register, and do it this week while it is still fresh. Because the one thing this whole story has taught me is that the switch does not wait for you to be ready. If everything I just shared worries you, let me help you fix it at home. Right after this, I take you through the full survival guide. It picks up exactly where I stopped. Inside the pension watch, you can ask me your own question, and a real person answers. Not a machine. You won't be alone. Thousands of pensioners like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime. 1 click.